Started. Let's see. So, in the first couple of lines, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "'Tis this, only this and nothing more." So in those first lines, you've got some imagery going on. He's painting just, it's dark, it's quiet. It's obviously, by using the words dreary, he's showing that he's sad, he's depressed, he's tired, he's almost falling asleep, he's got a lot going on, possibly thinking about some other stuff, but obviously he's tired, he's falling asleep, and then someone's gently tapping at his door, or he tries to convince himself that someone's tapping on his door, and it startles him awake almost. Odd distinctly, I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books of surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. So in this we get a little bit more information, and it also references another poem that Poe also wrote about Lenore, which is also named Lenore. So somebody died, and that explains why this person here is depressed and sad. Which here it's you get more information. It was a beautiful girl. He loved her. She died. It's a valid reason. He's grieving. So bleak December, that would be why we get more imagery here. That explains why he's dead. Why he's depressed. So the dying embers there is a little bit of symbols. So fire is a symbol for passion. So the dying embers is a symbol for the dying passions that he had for the dead Lenore. The angel's name Lenore is another symbol. So the angels are a symbol for what was pure, what was radiant, for happiness and joy. So Lenore was a person that had brought him happiness, that had brought him joy. So for him to say that angels have named Lenore is him saying that Lenore, this person, was a person so pure and so radiant that the angels must have been the ones to have named her. Continuing on, and the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." This is where it starts to get interesting. So, doorways, and the fact that he keeps repeating the doorway is a big symbol. Doorways and thresholds are a huge symbol for life and death, and also in this case between him and Lenore, and moving on further down the poem, between him and insanity, but that's for later on. Let me scroll down on my page real quick to make sure I'm touching on all the subjects. And so he's getting kind of, it's showing that he's kind of standing there at a kind of a crossroads of sorts. because of a doorway. Doorways, as I mentioned before, are a symbol. Now, he's also using a euphemism here as well, because thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. He's saying how he's both happy and terrified that somebody is there, which is something that is someone who is both grieving and depressed can be when someone is visiting them. Personal example, when my husband was deployed, I didn't want anybody to bother me, but I also was happy when people did. And so this person who's sad and grieving didn't really want to be bothered, but was happy that somebody was coming to visit him. So, moving on with the poem. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there and nothing more. So here's where you get personification. My soul grew stronger. Your soul physically can't really get any stronger. It's just a way of them saying that he grew a little bit more determined to, open up the door with, since he might be growing depressed, might have a little bit of anxiety going on. That's a big step forward. And since he's opening the doorway, since the door being a symbol, making that decision to open it up is him making a decision. And when you're grieving, making a decision to do anything can be a big step. And then the line, darkness there and nothing more, is a symbol, and a big one. Because I can't remember who it was by, but there's a saying, when you stare too long into the abyss stares back. And it's meaning for when you've got insanity and you look into it, you can become insane. And in this case, it's starting to show that he's starting to hold on to his grief for too long, and starting to show that he's starting to hold on to his grief for too long. It's starting to consume him. And it's also showing that that not only is the poem starting to take a turn for the worse, but so is he. So moving on, deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming, dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But in the silence unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. And the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. And this I whispered, and echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this and nothing more. So you've also got some more personification going on. So you hear the wind whispering back Lenore. So he's obviously got this person on his mind, this girl, Lenore. So you could tell that he's got some melancholy going on, some more depression, and his thoughts are being consumed of her. And it's starting to drive him a little bit insane, but he doesn't realize it. He doesn't see it. And so because of that, he's starting to hear things. And then when the wind starts to blow really hard. And so because of that, it kind of throws him off. He goes, what? Lenore? And just kind of has to say it back. So, lost my place. Okay. So with that, Let me double check. And so in here with the darkness, it's also showing that he's got some insanity and stuff going on. Moving on, back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what the threat is, and let this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and let this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. So once again, we've got the expression here, burning. So we're mentioning fire again. So the symbolism there, which meaning fire, passion. So he's got his passion ignited again, but it's not meant for Lenore. This time it's more of like anger. He's starting to get a little angry that Lenore keeps getting brought up, that he can't seem to let go of her. And this time he's hearing the knocking again, and it's starting to drive him a little crazy. So at first he thinks that it's the knocking that's driving him crazy. And it's the knocking that's driving him insane, because he thought he heard it at the door, but now he's hearing it at the window. And when you hear noises, and when you've got anxiety and depression, and you hear things, or you think you hear things, it's unsettling, and you try to convince yourself otherwise. And when you know you're sure you heard something, you try to convince yourself otherwise, and it can really start to disturb your own mind. And so he's really just trying to do everything he can to hold himself together, and you can see that when you read it and how he's saying, okay, let's go and explore it. Let's go and check and see what's at the window. Let's go and check and see what's at the door. And that's what he's trying to do. Open here I've flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in here stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not in the least obstinance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with the mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. So he's a little angry, and you can start to tell that he's, well, not angry, but annoyed, to say the least, because he's flinging open the shutters. And you can tell that, like I was saying earlier, you can tell he's getting kind of annoyed at everything that's going on, because he just kind of flung open his door, just flung open the window. Technical difficulties, sorry. So he just flung open the window. So he's a little upset that he's hearing these noises, and he's wanting to investigate them. And instead of there being nothing like there was at the door, he finds a raven. And it comes in, and it's just, it's got the behavior, the look of something regal, something majestic. And it just goes and stands above his doorway. And he's just like, okay. And it just watches it as it stands. So let me scroll down. So we've also got some symbolism here. Ravens are symbols of death and birds of ill omen. They're also birds of prophecy, because they're very intelligent birds. So moving forward, then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of this countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, said I, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So, just by the bird being there, for some odd reason, he was slightly annoyed, he was kind of sad and depressed, but the bird flying in unexpectedly into this guy's chamber makes him smile. And he was sad and depressed, and it makes him smile. And for some people, especially when they're going through depression and going through grief, especially over a lost loved one, that's a big thing. But here we've got some symbolism. We've got some symbolism through the way that he's smiling. Now, the smiling is kind of an ironic symbolism, because he's smiling not in the way of it being a happy ending. Because smiling usually means happy, it's gonna be fun. But as with most of Poe's work, they don't have happy endings. And in this way, it's, to me, they indicate the coming madness. And with most people who have gone insane, they're smiling, they're happy. I'm not talking crazy, murdery, killy insane. I'm talking about that's criminally insane. But we're also going with some imagery in here with grave and stern decorum. So the use of the words grave and stern, it's very serious. So this bird it's got a very serious nature and stature about it. There's nothing funny about it, but somehow it's so serious and so solemn that it makes this man smile. Now, this guy is talking to this bird. He's not expecting an answer, and somehow it talks. And that's some personification there. Ravens don't really talk. I mean, they can call a response to humans, but that's a trained response. But, quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as nevermore. Now, here we go into, it flips. The author, or the narrator, I should say, goes from calling this raven from beautiful, majestic bird to awkward in 2 different stanzas. So, in that, with the word ungainly, and here it is to mean awkward, because he's trying to ponder what it means. Let me scroll down. And so we've also got some symbolism going on here. It's showing the bird above the doorway. This raven is standing at the doorway. The doorway is the threshold between life and death, him and Lenore. Now we're also starting to see the doorway to be the threshold between sanity and the insane. And this is where we get that big turning point. But the raven sitting lonely on that placid bust spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends had flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said nevermore. So, just one moment. So here, this guy, he was smiling, he was happy that the bird showed up, or that this raven showed. But now we switch back to being sad and depressed. But we're also showing another element. This man is lonely. I mean, of course, his one love died, Lenore. And so, but the raven sitting lonely on that placid bust spoke only. That's where we get it. So that's where we get the lines that show that the sky is lonely. Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before. And so this is where we're also going to say, he's saying that the raven here is going to leave as everybody else have left. So this is showing that his friends have left him as everybody else has left him. So they've all abandoned him. So it's showing that not only did Lenore leave him by dying, which she may or may not have any control over that, probably not by choice, and that his friends left him. And so he's saying that the raven's going to leave him too, and so he's getting kind of mad at it. But the bird here says, nevermore. And he doesn't say it, doesn't exclaim it, doesn't do anything, it's just nevermore. And so within that, we get a euphemism. So it's, he's lonely, he's saying the bird's going to leave, as everybody else has. And then we've also got personification. Hope can't actually fly. Startled at the stillness broken by a reply so aptly broken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters in its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore of, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of never, never more. So here we've got some imagery and we've got some more symbolism and some slight foreshadowing. So it's showing that even though that he's a little annoyed that the raven here showed up, it was able to make him smile just a little bit. It was able to make him a little bit happy, because as soon as he was saying, you're going to leave just as everybody else left, the bird went, nevermore. And it was such an immediate response that it kind of made him draw back a little bit. And that's when he goes, doubtless, said I, what it utters in its only stock and store. And that's when he's saying, well, what an unhappy person must have owned this bird to name him nevermore. And then with the symbolism and foreshadowing, with the raven as birds of death and prophecy, with the only word that the raven speaks being nevermore, it's starting to drive the man a little crazy that that's the only thing that it's speaking. But it's also getting the narrator, to think, and also drive him a little bit crazy, which this whole story is about. Well, the whole poem is about this raven driving this man into insanity. But maybe it's not the raven doing it, it's the whole situation around it. But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself into linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what ominous bird of yore, what grim, ungangly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. So he's just trying to think about what's going on, and he's trying to think about how and why this bird came here, and he's trying to figure out where it came from, why it's here, and what's going on. He's happy the bird's here, but he's also not at the same time. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining. On the cushion's velvet lining the lamplight gloated over, but whose velvet violet lining the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. So this I sat guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. So those first two lines that I just repeated, we've got some imagery right there. So it's saying that fiery eyes, it's showing that there's a passion within the raven. But it's kind of an angry passion. And when they say into my bosom's core, especially in the time period that this was written, he's trying to say that it's burning straight into his heart, straight into his soul. So he's starting to think about Lenore, and he's starting to say that this is starting to get to him right where it's starting to hurt the most, where he's starting to think about his grief and his depression. And that's where you get the line, she shall press never more. And that's why it's italicized, the word she, because he's trying to shake his thoughts of Lenore. He is trying to get Lenore out of his head. It's really hard for him to do. And he's just trying to forget her. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, nepenthe, from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore, quoth the raven nevermore. So here you've got more imagery. So you get an image where he's thinking that an angel is coming to visit him. And you've got a euphemism. It's to show that Lenore's weighing on his mind. And it's in this stanza that you could get the image of it visibly seen that it's weighing heavily on his mind. And that she cannot get it out of it. That he just can't seem to shake his thoughts of Lenore. And that he's just feels that somehow the raven is the one bringing her to the forefront of his mind, when it's really he's just trapped in his own head. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter set, or whether tempest toss thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm on Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven nevermore. So, in this stanza, there isn't any happy thing going on. And that's a big thing for Poe. Because in each of the other stanzas, there's at least one small happy thing. A mention of an angel, a mention of a smile, something that brought the narrator a small happy thing. And in this stanza here, it's showing that he's starting to give into his grief, give into his depression, and kind of give up and just decide that he's going to live with it. You've got some symbolism. Like I said earlier, you've got symbolism of the fact that he doesn't mention anything happy, of showing that he's just giving into it, giving into his grief and giving into the madness. And then, of course, you've got personification with the raven not being able to speak. Ravens can't actually talk. All right. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul what sorrow laden, if within the distant Adian it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So we've got some symbolism here, some more of the angels to show that Lenore was pure. We've got the raven, which is more of another symbol, but this time it's a little bit of a different one. It's to show that he's also given into the madness and the insanity, given into his depression as a bird of ill omen. And he's just he's given up on trying to let go of his grief. Be that word a sign of our parting, bird or fiend, I shriek, upstarting. Get thee back to the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit thy bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So we've got the doorway again. The threshold between life and death. The sanity and the insane. Him and Lenore. And we've got some more euphemism. Take thy beak from out my heart. To mean that his heart is broken. And the raven's presence in his house, it's tearing him apart at this point. It's causing him to become insane. It's driving him mad. It's making him think of Lenore, and he can't take it anymore. And so he's telling him to leave, to get out. He can't take it. And to just go. And so... And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming through his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. So on this one, we've got some symbolism. We've got the doorway. Again, we've got the shadow. We've got some demons. So the mention of a demon within the eyes of the raven to symbolize the madness and insanity within the narrator. The symbol of the shadow to represent the depression and the grief that he went through, and it's going to be a permanent part of his life. And he's just not going to be able to move on, especially since, referencing back to Lenore, if it's safe to assume that the narrator here is the same narrator of the poem Lenore. They were engaged to be wed. And so it's essentially the loss of a spouse, or the loss of a loved one. So it hit the narrator hard. And so he can't seem to get over the grief. And he can't seem to get over the loss. And so it's going to be a permanent part of his life. And so part of that is his sanity breaking. And that's why he seems to see the demon's eyes inside the raven. Now, with the imagery, with the play of the light and the shadow in this stanza, it's to show that the light and the darkness that's inside every human being. Everybody has light and dark inside them. Everybody has periods of happiness and of sorrow. Everybody's got that. And within this last stanza, it's to show that the narrator has made a decision to hold on to his grief and depression, and it has driven him into madness. Now, with that, it's also kind of to point out that it's within everybody, and it's also to show how this particular person handled that grief. He went to try to seek solace within his books and was unable to, and how this person was extremely lonely, and how he was so excited that somebody was trying to visit him, and was sad when nobody was there, and he was happy that it was just a bird ended up being at his doorway, and then the bird ended up driving him insane by only saying one word. But it wasn't really the raven that drove him insane. It was him being trapped inside his own thoughts. It was his own loneliness and him being unable to let go of his grief and let go of his own sorrow. And it really hits home for a lot of other people, and Poe does a really great job of covering mental health issues within his stories, especially with a lot of his poems and everything. I've got Lenore right here next to it, and I reference that a lot too. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.